The date was 15th July 2020, when the country was under a strict lockdown and everyone was stuck in their houses. One young lady encountered an impressionist, projecting years of legal trouble right before her eyes. Enraged to see how things were, she transformed an idea in her mind into a startup. This is how Rest the Case was born. Rest the Case completes a year on 15th July, and what a year it has been. A year full of challenges, lots of changes, but most importantly, lots of learning, growth, and development. Ladies and gentlemen, we are gathered here today to celebrate Rest the Case turning a year old. I would like to begin today's event by extending a warm welcome to our dignitaries, Mr. Pankaj Sharma, President Lexicon Group, Mr. Neeraj Sharma, Vice Chairman Lexicon Group, Mrs. Monisha Sharma, Director, Mrs. Deepti Sharma, Director, Mr. Nasir Sheikh, CEO Lexicon Group of Institutes. A very warm welcome to our esteemed panelists and our lovely audience. Welcome everyone to Rest the Case's first, but definitely not the last panel discussion on artificial intelligence in law. Let's start by introducing the star of today's show, Rest the Case, with a short video.
Welcome to Rest the Case, one-stop solution for all legal services and information. We are a legal aggregator platform connecting lawyers and clients. Finding legal help has never been easier. Just sign in and find a lawyer you want. You can filter lawyers by location, specialization, and even PIN code. All the lawyers on our websites are verified. Talk to lawyers immediately if they are online, and if not, book an appointment. We understand that legal matters are confidential, and that is why all information on the website is encrypted. Not sure about the process or having some trouble getting in touch with a lawyer? We have got your back. Just mail us at info@restthecase.com. Legal drafting can be time-consuming and a tricky business, but we have you covered. Get numerous documents templates to choose from. You just need to select a document template, fill in the details, and download your document. It's just that simple. Believe it or not, that is not the only thing we have to offer. Rest the Case also has an extensive legal library. Browse through our legal tips, book reviews, daily legal news updates, and a lot more. Why go anywhere else when you can get everything in one place? Rest the Case, your one-stop solution for all legal needs.
Thank you for watching the video. We have added a link of our website to the comment section. You can check our website post the event. Before we move ahead, I request everyone to keep the following points in mind. I would request all the speakers to only unmute themselves when they are speaking. This will ensure that the person speaking at the moment can be heard clearly. Moving ahead, I'm sure after I introduce our panelists, everyone will agree with me that we couldn't have had a better set of people to have this discussion. I present to you our panelists who have minds sharper than AI. Beginning with Namita Shah. Namita ma'am is the co-founder of Preserve 360, a legal tech company recognized by the Department of Justice, Government of India. The company specializes in online dispute resolution via electronic arbitration and mediation. Her work has been featured in the Business Today magazine, the Hindu Daily, Business World, Artificial Lawyer International Publication, popular blogs like Your Story, The Chronicle, Youth Ki Awaaz, and The Legal Forecast, and the radio shows on 94.3 and 91.1 FM. Namita ma'am has been recognized among the top 60 of the Women Transforming India 2018 initiative by the Government of India. Up next, we have Jawad sir. Jawad sir has been a mediator since 2007. He has extensive experience in mediating commercial, contractual, matrimonial, and child custody cases. He is a trainer with the MCPC, Supreme Court of India, and has trained lawyers and judges in mediation all over India and has conducted training of trainers workshops for the MCPC. He works for the ADR ODR International, UK, a thought leader in ADR and ODR, as a mediator and global faculty, and has been involved in mediation training programs in universities in the UK and India. He is a partner and head of the ADR services with KD Lex Chambers, a firm offering a range of ADR services. He's also a specialist guest faculty with the Maharashtra National Law University. Next, we have Tanu Mehta. Tanu ma'am is a practicing advocate, mediator, and dispute resolution specialist with approximately 25 years of overall experience. She is currently also the honorary director of the Center of Mediation and Research at the Maharashtra National Law University at Mumbai, which has just launched India's first MA degree program in mediation and conflict resolution, which has been designed and implemented by her. Ma'am has independently handled several cases dealing in constitutional issues, service laws, human rights, land development and regulation matters, copyright laws, environmental issues, to name some. She has been consulting with various organizations and institutions as an independent counsel and a dispute resolutionist. As a mediator and conciliator, she has been handling case reference from court and private institutions in diverse areas of disputes such as commercial, domestic, civil, criminal, environmental, developmental, and such fields. Up next, we have Dr. Ashok Sharma, who is a member of our advisory board. He has over 47 years of experience as an advocate, an in-house counsel in a leading commercial bank, and then international trading company MMTC for over 26 years. He is fellow Chartered Institute of Arbitrators, London. He's member governing body India Council of Arbitration. He's member Executive Committee ICC India. He's member General Committee Singapore Chamber of Maritime Arbitration. He's former chairman Standing Legal Committee Scope New Delhi. He is member governing body Scope Forum of Conciliation and Arbitration. He is treasurer governing council International Center for Alternative Dispute Resolution New Delhi. He is member Supreme Court Bar Association and member Delhi High Court Bar Association. Then we have Pallavi Parekh. Pallavi ma'am is also a member of our advisory board. She is the founder and CEO of Ungender, which makes workplaces legally compliant. She is founder of Conduct, a SaaS B2B product to help companies comply with the legal provisions of sexual harassment at workplace laws and other gender inclusion laws affecting workplaces. She is the co-founder of iPleaders.in, a legal education company. Apart from this, she is the managing trustee of the Initiative for Inclusion Foundation. Last but definitely not the least, we have Shreya Sharma, founder and CEO, Press the Case, as our moderator. So with that, I will let Shreya take it ahead from here. Over to you, Shreya.
Hi, good morning. And thank you all for joining us here today. I am delighted to host the panel discussion with the experts of legal profession. Our entire team is very, very glad that you all have decided to join us while we celebrate our one-year anniversary. Without further ado, because we have already spent a lot of time, I will start introducing the topic of the day. So AI has seeped in our lives pretty closely today. That begins from asking Alexa to hit your favorite playlist in the morning to reminding you of your important meeting. It is everywhere. Although AI seems like a distant concept when we project it in the field of law, today that's not entirely true. With the recent launch of Supace, which is an AI-based analytical research tool, there has been a lot of air around how AI can do good in the justice system. Or on the contrary, is AI any good to the justice system? I would like to direct my first question to you, Jawad sir. So there are about 4 crore cases pending in the lower court and close to 68,000 pending cases in, so there are around 68,000 pending cases in Supreme Court. It is believed that the introduction of AI in the judiciary will speed up this process rapidly. Can you tell us your take on this?
Okay, first of all, let me make this clear, because we have some real experts on this panel. We have Pallavi, we have Namita, we have Tanu, and we have Ashok. I can only tell you from the legal perspective, because I am what I was describing myself as a digital immigrant, because all those who are born in the 60s, we are all digital immigrants. We have just entered this digital world, and we are trying to cope with it and trying to understand it and trying to see how best we can adapt ourselves to it. And who we have here are digital natives, especially the young ones who are born after the 80s. So from my perspective, when I look at it, how I see it is, where I see AI playing a major role is maybe, to look at it from a very contextual point of view as a vaccine against the pandemic of litigation. So you have rightly said, Shreya, that we have more than 4 crore cases pending in the courts today. Now, what we need to do is, before we think of how we are going to deal with those cases, we need to make sure that there are no further cases that keep coming into it. And if you see if you examine the data closely, and data is very important, and Pallavi was telling that before we started this session, that data is something that we really are not focused on. We don't have the correct data. But if you see, in my assessment, I think more than 50% of the cases would be relating to the government. Some state department or the other will be involved. And it is all very simple stuff like, somebody applies for a khata for their land, and one of the clerks there decides that, okay, I don't like this guy's face, and therefore I'm not going to give him the khata. And then this man has to go, or this woman has to go and invoke the court's jurisdiction to file a case and get it done. I'm just giving you an example, and there are multiple such cases that are pending, which are very frivolous, if I can call them that. So one thing that AI possibly can do is that, prevent these from coming even to the court. So a sort of a gateway or something where the entry can be regulated, where these cases can be analyzed and AI can, give the solutions then and there. Based on the legitimacy of any applications that are being filed. Then we have, a major part of bank disputes, which again depend on the idiosyncrasies of the concerned officials who may be there, who may or may not like the creditor and the debtor, and therefore they create problems over there. So these are all, cases where I think if we can have something which is not human, which can take a more pragmatic view of the situation without giving in to biases and prejudices and likes and dislikes. A whole lot of litigation can be avoided is what I feel. Okay, and most important thing is AI can play a great role in for the lawyers themselves, because a lot of problems arise because of the way we read the contracts, the way we interpret and understand the contracts, or maybe some human error that might creep into a framing of a contract. So AI can possibly do all those, analysis of the documents, review the documents, and do it much faster and more efficiently, with, the scope for error being reduced substantially. So that is where I see a role for AI. So that again is another preventive measure that can be, used to avoid, a contract getting into any kind of a dispute, and then further on leading to any kind of litigation. Then we have cases where, it is only a question of applying a formula. We have accident claim cases. We have so many other, matters where all it needs is to just apply a mind. Consumer cases. Now we see a lot of companies like eBay, Alibaba, Amazon, using AI to resolve consumer disputes. And I remember somebody telling me that, out of probably some 6 million cases, probably 1,000 cases come for a customer interface for resolving the dispute. So I'm not having the correct statistics, but it is somewhere in that range. So there is a lot of potential there, because, frivolous cases which are of a very small nature, they are clogging the whole system today. So I see a very great role for AI. But having said that, I would also like to say that, if we are looking for a replacement of human judges with AI judges, then I think that is something which may happen, because it's very difficult to predict the future today, sitting where we are, and the kind of, advances that have been made over a very short period of time. In 10 years, we have seen a whole lot of upheavals, disruptions happening in the tech world, and how AI is crept into, like, I don't need to necessarily use a stethoscope to measure my heartbeat. I don't need to go to a doctor. I can simply wear a watch or keep my finger on the camera of my phone and it tells me how my heart is functioning. So we are reaching that level today. So there might be a time when, you know, probably you feed in your data to the machine and the machine will tell who's right and who's wrong and what A should do and what B should do. That possibility is also there. I'm not overruling that possibility. And but the scenario is a little, for people like me, it's a little frightening because the absence of the human element. And maybe some other question that may come up, I'll try to answer that because I don't want to take up too much time answering your first question. So how the human element plays a very important role as human beings for us. So I don't see that happening in the near future. Maybe sometime when Namita reaches my age, probably that may happen, where we'll have AI judges. But at present, I don't see that. But where I do see the potential is where we can prevent the further, you know, 4 crores becoming 8 crores. So that is something I think that is easily preventable, and AI systems can definitely help on that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So based on your answer then, Pallavi ma'am, I want to direct the next question at you. So as Sir said now that we can use AI for things that are very technical related to the law. So like if there's a law and I have to give a judgment only based on that, I should be able to give it easily with the help of AI. So we already have an analytical tool in place that AI uses. That uses AI. So what is your opinion in bringing AI into making decisions in the court?
I think Jawad already answered that question. We as a humanity, as a society, have not yet evolved in our own understanding of how to give. There's so much subjectivity in the decisions, in the situations, in every case that is incorporated, that we ourselves have not yet gone to that curve entirely. And we have to understand that any technology is as good as its creator, right? So let's look at the mirror and ask ourselves this question: that have we evolved enough to actually be able to say that as a creator we are ready to create now a technology which can replace us? That's number one. The evolution has not happened yet. Second, there's so many elements of human empathy which are required when any particular matter is being assessed. I mean, one of the most common ones, because I also believe, because that's like one area where I look into, is that we are missing on the basic premise of gender sensitivity or understanding of the gender and sexuality dynamics. Now, if we ourselves have not really evolved in understanding it, if we ourselves never actually acquired this, are we really ready to push this incomplete knowledge into an AI which will only be looking at things from a factual angle? And the fact itself are getting evolved right now. Right, that's number two. Number three, but I do agree with what Jawad said, right? That to a certain extent, we can create preventive measures here, because basically when we are talking about AI entering the legal system, and especially if you are looking at the court cases, we are talking about accessibility to justice. Right, we are looking at the entire justice system and saying that, okay, where are the blockages, where are the bottlenecks, and how we can actually prevent it. So one is the preventive side, second is the reactive side. Reactive side is already the cases which are pending in the court, but in the preventive side, 3 stages, right? Number one, education and awareness, right? People really need to make informed decisions so that future mistakes can be prevented. Most of the common scenarios that Jawad was referring to, they can easily be prevented if people only knew what they are signing, what agreements they are entering into, what contracts they are engaging in, and what exactly should be the right way of doing this. Now, they may acquire this knowledge through different learning platforms which are now available to educate the common people about the technicalities, converting the technical into layperson's language. But then the second step is, even if you're not able to find that knowledge somewhere, do I have accessibility to those experts? Once again, now the technology has brought this aggregated pool of experts from different locations, different experiences, The affordability has been created for me to be able to find resources that I can afford. And then comes the third part, that when I know what are the right ways to do about it, and I have somebody who can guide me on doing those things in a right manner or a correct manner. At the end of the day, right and wrong is subjective. In the correct manner, legally speaking. And then the third thing is, as and when I approach them, then those experts are also equipped with the updated knowledge. So we are not dealing with then individuals who are not even updated with the current trends. What is it that is evolving? So these three stages definitely can be taken care if you are looking at actually AI entering into legal space and creating preventive mechanisms. And then comes the reactive side, which Jawad had already covered. So I don't want to I agree with everything that he was saying. So that's exactly what it is, that as from judiciary perspective, actually saying that someday there will be an AI sitting in front and actually making whether giving the verdicts. As a society, as a humanity, we haven't evolved enough to take that step. But of course, we are very audacious also, right? So we do believe that we can. But I think it will be better if we look in the mirror and say that, hey, have we addressed all our biases? Are we even aware of all our biases? Before we actually start telling somebody else that this is how you should be. So that stage hasn't occurred yet.
So, ma'am, like you said that maybe we're not ready to give a decision yet, but do you think there are some parts of the law that we can address now with AI? Instead of not going to decision, which is a little far-fetched, something that we can do now, something that's available for us to do now. Do you think there's something like that?
Absolutely. See, the procedure has to be broken down, right? Right now, everything for which, for example, if I have to file or even if I have to initiate a proceeding, right? Right now, whatever that process is it based on paper? Is it based on, brick and mortar model? Is this something that I can break online? Look at the change that happened when online FIR started. Right. There was a certain point in time when people actually had to walk into a police station and go through the entire process of filing an FIR. But then we took it online and it made it easy and convenient and comfortable for a lot of people. Now, of course, there was another debate, another school of thought that was countering it, that now we will have superfluous FIRs floating around. But there's a way to prevent that also. You can put checks and balances in place to create that. So what we actually need to do, Shreya, to answer your question, is we have to break it down into micro services and then pick the aspects of it from the solution perspective. So yes, maybe the last bit that we are talking about is still at the end of the day a human form sitting on the other side, and that's what we are seeing, right? We can bring humans online, but every process before that, the filing part of it, sourcing a lawyer, getting somebody to represent you, the consultations that you need to do, the documentation that is required to be created, the submissions that are happening. I mean, I still see even during the COVID time, lawyers were still roaming around in their cars with full, stack of files because the submission is still offline and they still have to go to the course and submit. So those submissions, and that also creates lack of data, going back to where we started, right? That how will the data exist if it is not even being fed into the system? So the minute we bring everything online, then that data becomes available, and solutions like pre-solve and they will be able to actually make better, faster, more precise solutions out there, because now there's this pool of data that they can actually analyze and start creating patterns from. Right, so breaking it into microservices till the point that we can actually be very sure that human intervention is not going to corrupt the judgment or the justice, that the whole idea of justice delivery mechanism or the system, it will not corrupt that output. Till that point, we can definitely use AI to bring into picture, and then at the end of it, let a human take care of it.
So Ashok, so actually I want to ask you now that, so now we have discussed, I think we can safely say that we can say that the law is sometimes, from time to time, quite subjective, right? So there have been instances in the past where judgments have been given based on the societal conduct, which may be contrary to the law sometimes. So, which will not be the same in when you're using the AI systems. So they will not be subjective. It will probably be more very sticking to the law and sticking to what's written down and the data that is fed. So what is your take on this?
Actually, Shreya, could you just please repeat your question because there was an aeroplane going, so I missed out some part of it.
No
Last part.
problem. I was saying that we have now discussed that the law is subjective, and so there have been instances in the past where judgments have been given based on the societal conduct, which sometimes can be contrary to what the law is like, what is written down, and what the law says. So with the AI system in place, it will be very, it could be very objective because there'll be specific data that they'll have to feed into the system, and it could be quite objective. So the emotional quotient of any judgment it would seem that it would be subtracted or would be removed from any judgment. So I want to ask you, what is your take on that?
Shreya, it's a complex question. AI in law in USA has made very exciting developments. I mean, there is this thing called predictive analytics, legal analytics, where they have developed, systems based on AI, Lex Machina and Premonition AI, which they have large amount of data relating to judges, lawyers, corporates, and then those machines, I mean, those systems can predict in what way a particular corporate will act, or in what way a particular judge will give judgments. In fact, jury selection, which is very prevalent in USA, I mean, these systems are being used to predict in what way a particular juror would react. So such kind of systems, if they are incorporated into justice delivery system, maybe they can assist the honorable judge to a certain extent in making up his mind about a particular case which is before the judge. But then I think in practical terms, it's a little bit long way off, particularly in a country like India. I mean, and secondly, these data which is fed into the system, that is done by a coder. Now that particular coder may have a particular bias which he may inject into the system. So if that, it is kind of, I won't call it virus, but then that kind of bias is injected into that AI empowered system. So then that system will generate, I mean, outputs which are biased towards that particular aspect. So this AI is not really, I mean, it's not holy grail, I mean, which could probably solve, but yes, it definitely, it can add to efficiencies of a justice delivery system. And in coming times, definitely, I think in docket management and other things in the courts, like huge caseloads which we have, I mean, these systems can, help them streamlining it. But ultimately, I mean, how a judge is going to decide, I mean, that human mind is ultimately is going to be there. I mean, in near future, which I can see. Yeah.
Thank you. So then my next question is to you then, Tanvi. I wanted to ask you, so many have opposed that AI based on their views that decision making is a complex process and broadly differs from case to case and requires the human quotient like I was talking to Sir about. So would you have anything that you would also like to add to that?
Is this to me or to Mr. Sharma? I didn't
I
get.
think it's to you, Tanu.
You, ma'am.
All right. So firstly, I think decision making is a very, very high aim right now, because I don't think right now we should even aim at replacing AI with judges, right? Right now, AI is at a level, and this is happening, like Mr. Sharma said correctly. So in US, where they're already, they have so much data that they're able to now do predictive analysis, and they can possibly pick jurors according to, deep manipulation. See, in the West, it's already happening. What Facebook is doing, what Twitter is doing, they already have those analytics. So they are able to pick every single thing and ensure that kind of manipulation happens and people think that way. Okay, luckily, I would say absolutely luckily, we are still underdeveloped, so we don't have that kind of manipulative systems in place, and we are not going to have it most likely for the next, I don't think, 10 years easily. But AI is of huge importance to us in all the things that we haven't yet been able to scale. And this is where I'd like to respond to you. So I'm actually digressing from your actual question, Shreya, but taking in from Mr. Sharma and Pallavi and Jawad. My take is that AI is, in a setup like India, hugely helpful because of the inequalities of our system. Unlike the US or the West, where a lot of systems, the opportunities are equal and the systems are all equal for their citizens. Our systems are unequal. And I'll give you this through an example. Recently, there was a judgment of the Supreme Court, not a judgment, an observation, saying Section 66A Act, we've kind of abolished it, A of the IT Act, we've abolished it so long ago, and still police stations are filing and applying and putting in complaints under that act. Now, it could very well be, of course, that Supreme Court has done it, but what the Supreme Court does, 90% of our people don't know. I mean, who knows anyways, and certainly police stations policemen are not so updated. They are overworked anyways. So there could be, I will just take my place, a small hill town like Lonavala. Definitely, I'm sure the police will not know whether Section 66A has been abolished or, has been invalidated by the Supreme Court. What I expect AI to do is, when such judgment comes in, it fits or wherever it needs to be uploaded at the central level, that is uploaded within all the, law implementing systems, whether it's the police station, whether it's, a lobbyist of law, wherever it is, every system which implements a law, that thing is fed into the system. So therefore, when a policeman opens his computer or when a policeman just types in Section 66, when he's trying to type in a complaint and put it under that Section 66A, there will be a pop-up saying, sorry, not available. You cannot put any complaint under this act. That is where I expect AI to help, and that is what we should focus. We should not be worried about these things, that are happening in US, because that's not the way, our system is right now. And often my grouse is that often in our country, we start focusing on what is happening abroad and start applying those principles to India. Okay, whereas India is a completely different game. I think the same thing happened in Aadhaar. Here is a country, our countrymen are dying for inclusion. I know N number of people, and you must be knowing N number of people who are not included in the system because they don't have documents. Here was a way that we could include. And already we were thinking of the problems of privacy when you don't even have inclusion. After I'm included, then there will be problems of privacy. So you and I, who have access to everything, we are worried about privacy, but we are not looking at 80% of the people who are not even included in this. And that is where, often our debates and our public space gets queued up with things that shouldn't be our focus. So right now, even, what Pallavi said, she said, like, we are creating technology, if AI we are thinking is creating technology that can replace people, I think Nothing of that sort is happening in India. People right now, India is people rich. There is no way we will replace people. Okay, and it's the same fear that was built when computers were being introduced in 1980s by that time the Rajiv Gandhi government, and thousands of people went marching on the roads saying once you bring in computers, you know, where will all our labor go? It will completely dismantle our system. We took to it beautifully, so much so that we are now exporters, the biggest exporters of technology officers. So we should not worry at all about replacing people. We should think of how we can include people in the systems, and AI will be a huge asset to this country. Thanks.
Actually, I wanted to tell you a fact which was quite interesting when we were doing a little research for the panel discussion. So there was a survey that was conducted in a university somewhere in Gurgaon and in July, and it was found that 42% of lawyers believe that in the next 3 to 5 years, as much as 20% of regular day-to-day legal work will be through some AI system. And also it was found in that survey that 94% of law practitioners favored research and analytics as the most desirable skill in a young lawyer. So a young lawyer would then, according to this survey, that it would mean that a young lawyer would need to have these basic skills about, about AI in there. They would need to know these things. So don't you think that way we will have to evolve more and quicker probably to be in pace with that?
That's the question to me?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So a young lawyer, I think Namita should be more able to answer that. About research, yes, we will have to be involved. We will also have to evolve in our skill sets. So what I see today as an advocate, and when I want a junior or an intern working for me, I would like, you know, that person to have good research skills, because that is where I don't have the time to put in, you know, and I would like somebody to do research. Now, tomorrow, if AI is available to me, I possibly wouldn't need those many juniors or lawyers, right? Young lawyers or interns, and I'll probably be able to find everything that I want with one click. So how do you evolve then for the next set of, you know, lawyers? And I think there's just so much availability of work. I don't think there is any reduction of work, because they will maybe not work with lawyers, but I see a lot of young lawyers, you know, I see so much opportunity in the application of law, which we need to. So I would see young lawyers, I would like to see young lawyers in, you know, all government offices, assisting all of those who are implementing the laws. So here we have, you know, some new law coming in, whatever that new law could be, anything that's, you know, recently come in, okay, something about cyber laws and things like that. And definitely our government officers neither have the time nor the wherewithal, the technological wherewithal to, like Pallavi said, feed in the systems, right? They don't have the capability at all. That's where I'd like to see young lawyers going and assisting the implementation of law, implementation of legal systems, so that it eventually reaches out to the larger population. So access to justice has to improve via implementing processes, and that is where AI can be hugely helpful. And that is how I see even law evolving, because we have fantastic laws, and in fact, most of our laws are so well thought, debated, you know, they come in after so much debate in the social space. It's the implementation where we always fail, always. And that is where this next level and this next evolution has to happen.
Jawad sir, actually based on what Tanu ma'am said, we had a question for you. So in a country like India, there are a lot of people that are employed for jobs that, like she was saying, now machines do a lot of the jobs that that people would need before. So do you think that with AI and law, employment force in the legal field would take a hit?
Okay, actually, I was listening to Yuval Noah Harari recently on YouTube, and he says just as the Industrial Revolution created a group called the working class, the proletariat, the AI revolution is going to create a group called the useless class, in which the huge majority of all of us are going to be. But being the incorrigible romantic that I am, I refuse to believe that. Okay, because what I personally believe is what makes us human is our vulnerability. Now, Pallavi used the word empathy, right? And what makes it different for me? Like for example, Watson can look at me and tell me what exactly I'm feeling at the given time. But the problem is Watson cannot feel what I'm feeling. There lies the difference. So if Watson cannot feel what I'm feeling, why should I listen to Watson and trust Watson, discuss with Watson what I'm feeling? So we are all, whatever that we are talking about, our litigation, everything is based on how our perceptions, the way we look at the world, how we feel about situations. Tanu will agree with me there that, injustice is again a perception. So wherever I feel that injustice has been done to me, I take recourse to law to set right that. Now in law, I have several methods, like I can go to the court, I can, maybe seek the services of a mediator. Now what makes it good for me is that whether it's a judge or is a mediator, I know that that person, that human being sitting over there, can understand my emotions, can feel those emotions, can understand my perceptions. Okay, so I can explain what I'm exactly feeling about the situation to that person. So that's what makes it attractive. So when I want to engage a lawyer, I would also like to, not just feed something in my, let's say that an ordinary thing like a dispute, a boundary dispute with my neighbor. Now AI can easily resolve that problem. That AI, if I just feed the data inside into the app or whatever the system, AI can tell where exactly my boundary is and where my neighbor's boundary is and who's encroaching on whose territory. But there might be something more beyond that, because there might be something that, there's an underlying conflict between me and my neighbor, simply because my neighbor is better off than me and I don't like it, and he has a better car than me. Now, how is this conflict going to be addressed by AI? So what I feel is, from the legal perspective, I'm not talking about the other professions, about the other things. Take the medical profession also. I think the same logic would apply there. Because I go to a doctor, and when I discuss my problem with the doctor, I know maybe the doctor may make a wrong diagnosis. I understand that. But what makes me feel comfortable with the doctor is I know that, the doctor can be a victim of the same illness or the same disease that is going to plague me, and therefore he's going to be careful in treating me, and he will be able to understand, or she will be able to understand my pain, my suffering. So that is what makes us connect. That's what makes us tick, and that's what, helped the Homo sapiens to survive through thousands of years of evolution. Okay, so now actually a lot of research has established that it was not the selfish gene, but the gene of empathy that allowed us to, survive. So I feel that it's at least not in my lifetime. I hope it doesn't happen in my lifetime. AI is certainly not going to replace in my life Ashok or Namita or Pallavi or Tanu. So I would love them to be there, and if I have a problem, I would love to discuss with them, and I would love to pay them for it if I have to. But I wouldn't like to go to Watson and tell that, this is my problem and please give me a solution to that. So maybe I'm being romantic here, but that's how I look at it. What I see is AI making things a little easy, as Pallavi pointed out, as Ashok pointed out, and Tanu also pointed out. Maybe make things easier, make things simpler. But as to whether AI will substitute a human, I don't think so. At least I hope not.
So
just I want to say one more thing. Like, why we connect as humans? Like, I can't take AI for a date. Like Alexa, I have at home, and I can tell Alexa to switch on my TV or switch off the lights. but I can't tell Alexa, join me for a cup of coffee. Can I? For that, I need somebody live, right? And if I fight with Alexa, Alexa is not going to console me. Alexa is just going to shut up. So how does all that happen? So this is where
Isn't that good though? You'll have your word.
Huh?
Isn't that good though? You will have your word.
No, I don't want. I want to be contradicted. See, why would I argue otherwise? If I want my point to be taken as the law, right? So this is where I see a lot of problems with these predictions that AI is going to take over humanity and humanity is going to become irrelevant, or even Harari again says that we may become superhumans. Okay, so I don't know how. I wouldn't like to live for 150 years, or even 500 years, or 150 years, or more than 90 years. I certainly don't want to live beyond that. Okay, thank you.
Shreya, may I just add to what Jawad has said? This recent crisis, COVID crisis, since the last 1 year, has given us a preview of what digital courts and digital legal environment can do to the lawyers. Leaving aside some senior counsels, as the hearings are moved online and district courts in most of the places all over the India, they are closed. Legal community, young lawyers who were doing, court work in Mofussil and lower courts, they are all in deep trouble. So from practical perspective, because bails and other matters, small matters on which they were used to make, daily living, that has all stopped. And things which have moved online, unfortunately, they are not accessible, in the same manner. And then people they are opting for, a better lawyers, senior lawyers, rather than opt for a junior lawyer. So this has created a kind of disparity in the system. So if this is the shape of things to come, then yes, technology in law facilitates, but it is not. It is. Jawad is not being romantic. He is being a realist. It's not going to, replace humans in near future. It can only supplant, but it cannot replace. And if replacement takes place, as and when it takes place, in a country like India, where people are, available, talent is available, it is going to create a great social problem. So that is, that is my 2 cents on this.
We agree. So actually, thank you, sir, for adding that. We have one question for Namrata ma'am as well. So the question to you is that even if AI software is brought into force, so let's, for example, take it. Yes, sir. Sorry. So even if, let's take for example, we do get AI in our system. So easy do you think that the transition from the traditional way to AI will be? Do you think it will be like we'll all be able to cope, or we'll take a lot of time, or we'll take, how do you think we'll be able to do?
Sure, I think that's a great question. But let me just ask everyone who's listening that do you use a phone or do you use Google Chrome? Because if you do, you're already using AI. That is the most important thing first. That, when we think about AI, we often think like a robo who will be sitting in the court and then there will be people and then absolutely be no other humans and you will be in a completely machine world and it will be like a factory instead of a court. No, that's not what AI is at all. I think that's, some of the movies have probably created that impression that AI means, oh, humans will not exist anymore and we are doomed. It's nothing of that sort at all. A simple device like this is AI in your hands. A simple laptop is AI in your hands. And if you use Microsoft Word for preparing any document and it autocorrects spelling, that is AI. So people need to understand that AI does not mean you go from zero to the best possible thing that AI can do, which is replicate even emotional intelligence, and it can literally be an actual judge. No, that's not the concept. The idea is to use available technologies in our day-to-day work. The existing people itself, existing judges, court officers, lawyers, everybody can use resources available to make their work easier. And in a country like India, no matter, we often say that it is population heavy, we should use humans instead of technologies, otherwise there'll be lack of jobs. If that were the case, let me ask you one simple thing. Would 4 crore cases be pending? Would somebody have to wait for 17 years? That is the average time that it takes for a case to be resolved. Would that be the case? What would the reality then accordingly be that, okay, you go to court and you get an outcome the next day or in a month? It would not be that cases are piling up. Why is that happening in spite of India being so population rich? That is because of these inefficiencies in the system, which can be very well and very easily solved by AI. And to use AI does not mean you need to know how to code it, does not mean you need to know how to develop it. You just need to know that something can be done by technology and you have to just learn how to use it. And with time, the people who are actually developing these technologies are also making sure that it can be used by somebody who's not from a tech background at all. And that's the beauty of technology. You don't need to be a technologist to use technology. Technology, like law, is codependent on different industries, different people, different transactions, all of that. And it's as simple as that, like just like how you moved from making manual submissions to making them on Word, from looking at a lot of legal books to look at past references to now look at something like an SEC online to look at past case laws. It's just about that. And that does require some level of upskilling. I'm not saying that it's going to be innate to people. That requires some sort of upskilling. But when a law is amended, you upskill yourself, right? So this is just like an amendment of the law, where you just need to have a little more knowledge and you need to be open-minded to use it. Now the transition has already happened. People often say that, will AI transform the legal sector in India? But my answer is no, because it already is. It's not something of the future, it's something of the present, and it's nothing to be scared about. It's a very, very easy transition. The more we start using it, the better we get at it and the better the technology gets as well. So it's just about that. That's my opinion on the transition. Shreya, you're on mute in case you're saying something.
You're on mute.
Yes, thank you. I actually had some questions from the audience before we ask. There's this one conclusive question that we have for you all, but before we get to that, there are a couple of questions that the audience has asked. There's one question to Jawad sir, which says, when you speak of preventing the cases coming to the courts, wouldn't legal status of AI be the first hurdle?
I didn't get the legal status of AI, is it?
Yeah.
No, see, the thing is what I was picking up on what the others said, like predictive analysis, for example, or, deciding which case should go where. Like there might be cases which might be fit for mediation. There might be cases which might be fit for conciliation or arbitration. So that would be the way in which, you can possibly have a sort of for that the law has to be suitably developed for that, to ensure that, before a case comes to court, it goes through the process. Now today that is being done through the human agency. Cases come before the courts, and then this court judge decides whether this should go for mediation or this should go for arbitration. Instead of that, what I'm suggesting is that if AI can be developed to an extent where, or it can be implemented, if it is already developed, if it can be implemented, where it will decide that, this is a fit case for this particular method of resolution, or maybe offer solutions then and there, because, if it is a simple matter that can be resolved by just applying, the law and then, coming up with an outcome which would be acceptable to the people, that would be another way of resolving. And as Namita said, what she said is a very important point. We need not imagine AI as some kind of a form sitting over there. We are already using AI. Okay, so we are using AI even in the medical field. We are using AI in the legal field. See, there was a time when we used to in Madras High Court, we had to every morning at 5 o'clock and go through reams and reams of paper, which is called the cause list. It will be coming. It'll come in a totally disjointed way. We had to arrange it first page wise and then scan each page to see if any of our cases are listed. But today, all we do is just go into the website and click my name, and I know which case is coming up and which is not coming up. So that is AI again, as Namita pointed out. So there should be some system by which we can reduce the number of cases that are coming to the court. And that is where even lawyers can use AI to advise their clients that this is what needs to be done. So this is not something that is going to affect lawyers. In fact, it's going to make their work much easier. Okay, so by advising the clients that, okay, this is the solution that you will be getting. So what do you say? How would you like to resolve this? Give the option to the clients and then decide, tell the clients what needs to be done. So that is something that we can work on, okay, and we can live with, and that's not going to replace human beings at any point of time. So how to use AI to make our work, get the drudgery out of the way. Things you would spend, like I gave you the cost list example, at least 1 to 1.5 hours used to be wasted every morning. And today I could spend that time working out or meditating because I would have checked the list in the previous night itself, right? So drafting of contracts, if a couple is undergoing divorce, there are apps which there are applications, AI applications in abroad, which tell you that what exactly you will be entitled to. So you have a clear idea in your mind that if I go to court, this is what I'm getting. So why not I resolve it before I go to court and then go to court for the formal stamp of approval of the court. So these are the ways in which AI can possibly help us to bring down the backlog of cases. Prevent the cases from increasing further, and for preventing, getting rid of the backlog of cases, again AI may come into use to sort out the kind of cases that can be disposed of. We had one judge in the Madras High Court who used to go to the registry and take out all those cases which were identical, like which the same point of law, the same similar set of facts, and that just needed to for him to say that, okay, this is how this should be decided. And he used to dispose of hundreds of cases that way. So that job AI can do, right? So there are batch of cases. For example, if a community of people may have a particular dispute with maybe the state or with maybe the local municipality or something, and they will come and file a batch of cases. Now the entire batch, if the law is there, the facts are there, AI can apply that and dispose it off. So the judge can just pronounce the judgment based on the inputs that he gets or she gets from the AI. So these are the ways in which we need to use AI. So I don't know whether the others will agree with me. That's how I see it.
Thank you, sir. There's another question from the audience for Pallavi ma'am. It says, can you give an example of AI process that that can be used for to counter corruption?
I laughed because corruption is a different problem altogether. We haven't even did it. But okay. I think we have to categorize corruption also in different categories, right? What kind of corruption are we talking about? Which particular industry we are looking at from the lens of corruption, and which stage of corruption that we want AI to actually address. There are so many nuances to it. So whoever asked this question, trust me, it's a very difficult question for me to actually answer right now in a straightforward manner. But if you're asking me whether it can be done or not, I would definitely say yes. Okay. But let's just look at a small process right now. Okay. The lack of implementation of some of the laws that exist at this point in time. And a very small company in this country right now is required to be compliant with a law called POSH Act. And if they are not compliant with it, then they have a penalty, and on repeat violation, there is also possibility of double the fine or cancellation of business license. Now I know that INBA, EY, FICCI, a lot of entities are actually doing surveys to check how many companies are compliant. And that's also another problem, which segment that we use to actually do these kind of surveys. But somewhere it came out that only 35% of companies in this country are not compliant. Absolutely not true, right? Because if our data is only capturing, let's say, one industry segment, then that's the kind of response we are getting. My point here is, coming back to this, that to actually violate or to actually get away by not following certain regulations that the law is actually asking you, commanding you, demanding you to do, with very severe consequences associated with it, is also a form of corruption for these companies to actually continue performing, behaving as if nothing is wrong. And that creates a different kind of audaciousness. So yes, while in traditional sense we will think of corruption as money being exchanged and large deals being assigned and so many other things, but here I'm just giving a very relatable sense that when you walk into a workplace and you actually know that, hey, this place is not compliant or somebody is not getting their due right, which the company is required to complete, that also is a form of corruption. Companies to be able to continue performing here. Now, why is that happening? One, let's look at the process, how the government should be monitoring it, right? Every time a company follows this, there are two things that should be happening. One, if it's a company, then they are required to submit this as a notification under the MCA, their director's report. And if that is not happening, then there is once again consequences from the MCA that should happen. There's director's penalty there. Is that really happening? I have still not heard of any director actually paying any penalty so far for not submitting this particular piece of document. And even if this particular document is being submitted, which I'm hearing from a lot of people, that no, our CA has taken care of it. Well, then it's just a piece of paper that your CA has taken care of it. Is the MCA actually able to validate that this piece of paper has actually become the reality that was intended under the law? That's also a form of corruption, right? Who is checking this? Who is vetting this part? At the end of the year, companies are required to submit their annual compliance report to the district officers. Majority of the district officers across the country are not even appointed. The ones who are appointed, people don't know how to find them. Even if they somehow figure out where to find them and they send their annual compliance report, it's a paper envelope that is going. Who is keeping a track or copy or tally of it? And even if the district officer does someday decide to start putting or feeding this information in an Excel sheet, they actually don't know what to compare it to. If you have a Y as a number that, okay, let's say 5,600 companies have submitted their annual compliance report. Do you know what the X is? Do you even know how many companies are actually in this district actually required to submit an annual compliance report? So the comparative data is missing. Even go next step, right? You can actually declare anything in that report and say that, oh, we have conducted so many awareness sessions. Where's the proof? Who is checking it? So corruption, this is also a form of corruption wherein you get away by lying to the government or by not doing what the government is actually asking you to do. And this kind of corruption can very well be taken care of if there was an online system in place where companies register themselves. Every time there is a change that happens at the district level for a company to be performing, they are required to update their information. They are required to keep providing documents that support each and every activity that is being asked for them to do and that they're claiming that they have done with supportive documents. Right now, it's very easy for all of us to say, oh, district officers are useless. People say this, but district officers are not useless. It's just that when you look at district officer, there's tons of responsibilities that are there for them. The last thing that they will be doing is opening all those envelopes that they have been receiving and checking that, oh, this company has done this, but where are they going to log it? That's where I completely agree with what Namita was saying, right? I don't know, yesterday, was it Richard Branson or Elon Musk who was saying it? This whole going to the space thing. The host was saying that, wow, I wish I could go in this space. And I think it was Richard Branson who said that, hey, we are already living in space, right? So it's just something that we tell ourselves that it's somewhere out there. We're already part of it. And these are the systems, before the session started, we were talking with Ashok and Jawad, that these are the systems that will actually, they are required to be put in place to create check and balance, right? The minute you have this check and balance systematic approach to any process, that's where you're actually curbing these corruption at any level. So we need to actually sit down, look at the processes, break them into different micro steps, create check and balance, look at the authorities who are going to be handling those particular micro aspects of that system, educate them, equip them. Yes, as every other panel member has said, not everyone may be tech savvy, but then that's where we need to look at the capacity building also. But these are the measures where AI, where technology can actually curb, and I am a firm believer. I mean, systems technology will help us eliminate all these ambiguity in the check and balances which are required to happen. The minute we have them in place, that's where we have taken our journey to actually curb corruption, whichever area, whichever industry that we are dealing with.
Thank you so much. The next question was then for Tanu ma'am, which was what area of practice has benefited the most, where of your practice has been benefited the most from AI, or has it been benefited? Is ma'am still there?
Tanu is unmuted.
Yeah, can you just repeat? Sorry, I was on a call. Yeah.
No. What area of your practice has been benefited from AI, or has it been benefited from AI?
Right now, I can't even say, AI has touched, except for the way that Namita has said. I mean, to that extent, all of us have used AI, and that's been happening over the last 15, 20 years. Slowly, how all your judgments are coming in together, how your processes are so much easier to access, how right now during COVID times, we've been able to access courts via online mechanisms, even access all mediation efforts, mediation clients via online platforms. So that way AI has been hugely helpful, and it has been progressively introduced in our lives. So I mean, the question is, how has it impacted? It's positive, all positive right now.
And then there was one last question for Namita ma'am, who said, will the trust on the legal system increase if AI is brought into force?
Okay, let me just, okay, my views are very, there is some, I hope I'm audible now. My views are very, very aggressive on this. I'm just going to put that disclaimer out there. How I took a survey. So when we were starting Resolve 360, when we were building it, we took a survey across various spots in Mumbai, across different segments. And the surprising thing was we interviewed over 1,000 people, and a part of them were lawyers. And we asked the lawyers that, do you or your family members have a court case pending? All of them said no. The thing is that with the pendencies, with the time, with the procedures, with the complexities, with the corruption, everything, how much access of justice really exists in the country? How many people actually, I'm not saying that the judges are not doing their job. I think they're doing a fantastic job. The volume itself is so much that access to justice has almost become a myth. We often say that the cases take so many years that from a legal issue, they've often become a legacy issue in India, where they just get passed on from generation to generation, and still it's like Tariq pe Tariq, and the reality is still pretty similar even today. Now, when technologies can be introduced, not to replace judges or not to replace the court officers, but to help them so that they can make faster delivery of justice, so that hearings can happen faster, so that inordinate adjournments can be completely done away with. That will further enhance the efficiencies with which the same staff operates. So the idea is not to have an AI judge sitting there. The idea is to have an assisting technology to the judge, who can help the judge perform better, who then can help the entire access to justice become a reality in the country. So that's what I feel, that when technology is introduced in a much higher level than it already is, it's going to become far more transparent. It's going to become far more accessible. And as Tanu ma'am said, for the first time, it probably becomes far more equal for everybody to actually participate and not be left out only to a particular section of the society. And that's the impact that technology and AI can have in the legal sector in India.
May I add something here, Shreya?
Yes.
Because absolutely taking from her, see, the reality around us is that people who are working in whichever sectors, whether it is the judiciary, whether it's the legal sector, whether it is the official, the executive sector, AI is meant to help them reach their efficiency. Human fatigue is very high, all right? And usually if I have to read, for example, 2000 pages a day, okay, let's say if I'm a judge and I have to read maybe 2000 or 5000 pages a day, by the time I reach my last 2000, I'll be fatigued. And that is when an AI can help me absolutely have the same kind of, giving that same kind of attention, because the AI will bring out all the salient points of those 2000 pages or that 1000 pages. So basically what we are doing is aiding human beings to be, super efficient. Our problem is efficiency. And I mean, the best of us, the most efficient of us are also lacking in that last mile, and the most inefficient of us, great. I mean, if I'm very inefficient, then AI can at least bring me to a base efficiency level. So that's all that I can see AI doing now. I definitely don't see them completely wiping out the human and going in there, because that's just not going to be possible. As Pallavi said, we are only as good as, we are as good a creator as we can create. You can't be beyond that. So I can have AI only as efficient as I have thought. I can, if I feel my efficiency is 50%, I can say, all right, great, I'm going to create AI which is 100% efficient. But because that's my aim and my imagination, I can't be 0 and say AI will be 100, because I don't even know what is 100.
May I add one small point here?
Sure.
To what Namita had said. One simple way the technology has helped better access to justice is online filing of cases, which has come into existence with more vigor in the last 1 year. So there, someone sitting in a faraway place, he need not travel to a district to file his case or to engage a lawyer. He can go, his lawyer can go online from that place and file the case. So this is one big step which has been taken for improving access to justice by technology. Thank you.
Shreya, may I add to that? What Ashok and Namita has rightly pointed out. Just wanted to give an example. So Tanu, like you were saying, right? So we created this case management system for companies, ICs, to actually look into posh cases. Right, and every time we present it, the question that comes back to us from the IC is that, so we won't need an external member. Like immediately they jump to the part, so then we don't need an external member. And that's where we have to correct them, that the knowledge and the expertise and the subjectivity of when you're doing these meetings, when you're there, what to say, how to behave, how to keep your biases aside, all those things is something that you still need an expert to have present there. Because right now the system is there to guide you on step by step. The system is there to prevent you from certain things. The system is there to make sure that you are updated with every other legal update that is coming out of the courts. But please don't mistake that you will not need an external member. Right, and that's the same thing that we convey to the I'll go back to this efficiency part, right? That saving time, making sure that you have a more systematic approach to executing something, so that you can use your creative brain for much better things. I mean, by the time that you are tired, Imagine if I have to go to Bombay, if you tell me that Pallavi, there's only a way that you can take the bus, right? After a 24-hour or 36-hour of bus ride, if I come there, obviously my creativity is at a different level. But if I can take a flight, I'm fresher, I'm more alert, I'm less tired, and my creative side is more active. And that's what we are saying technology will allow us to do. It will allow us to get rid of that tediousness or lengthy processes as many ways as possible so that this stays alert and the body is not tired for us to make more efficient decisions.
Thank you so much. Yes.
And I just add my 2 cents to that, because from the perspective of access to justice, one of the thoughts that has been occurring to me frequently is because if you go to remote places in India where there is no internet access and other things, people find it very difficult to access anything. Now, it's not that without technology they were able to access, but what they are lacking is, we are not able to provide them with the technology. But what the state needs to do is provide them with the technology. And like we have ATM centers, why not install booths over there, where if supposing there's a land record issue which a villager is facing, or a villager has not been issued his Aadhaar card or an ID card, he simply walks into the booth and maybe appoint somebody who understands the legalities and other things, and who understands the technology. Appoint maybe even a law graduate, because today many young lawyers are going around jobless. So I'll give them employment over there so that they can assist those people in getting these disputes sorted out. So there are so many, enactments which empower tribals, which give tribals rights, but they are not able to exercise those rights. One, because they don't know about it. Number two, it's because they don't have that means to access it, because they are not able to reach out and, to go engage a lawyer and to file a case in the court and to spend the money and fight the case. So this is where technology can really be helpful. So instead of thinking that technology is going to replace human beings, we can see that, as Tanu, Pallavi and Namita and Ashok pointed out, we can see how it can, supplement the efforts of human beings to, improve their lives, to provide better access to justice, to improve the life of ordinary people who have so far been denied these benefits. Because justice has been accessible only to a select few. Now, just one example I'll give you. See, I had a matter in the Supreme Court, so every time the case used to come up, my client had to spend on the flight charges, on the hotel thing, and then pay my fees. Now, thanks to COVID, I was able to sit in my house and make my presentation in the court in Delhi. Now, this is where I feel that, yes, it is going to be a challenge to maybe people like Harish Salve or Falin Nariman, but it is something which will provide access to people, ordinary people, to be able to reach the highest court, because otherwise they could not afford to fly down there and do this. So online filing, virtual hearings, these are all things that will really help to advance the cause of justice.
One practical downside to this is, on the lighter note, is that when lawyers, they travel to other outstations, they charge double the fees. So now when they're attending hearings online, so they are not able to, charge the double the fees. But of course, senior lawyers are still doing that. But lawyers like you and me may not be benefited by this.
Now we would just like to ask you our conclusive question, so that we could maybe see the effects of AI in law. So if you could just give your closing statements on will AI enhance the capability of the Indian judiciary? If you could all just give your statements for that. Anyone can go first.
Well, okay, let me go in first and say that yes, I fully agree with this. Technology and law is definitely going to make our legal system more efficient and more responsive, more accessible. all it needs is that India is a very large country, and we have a large, area to cover. And various states, they have their own local peculiarities and things like that. So it's a Herculean task to cover the whole country under one network and one uniform network, I'll say. But then in due course of time, as and when it is implemented, it will definitely improve access to justice. It will definitely add to efficiencies of the court working, management of dockets in the courts. It is something which is unavoidable now. Last 1 year has shown us that this is the way things are going to take place in future. Maybe when we return to the physical hearings, maybe it might not be the total physical hearings. It might be a hybrid system which may come into force now. So if that is the future, so technology is there, it is going to be there. So we all have to adapt to it. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Namita?
Sure. So, as I said before, I think AI and technology is already enhancing the capabilities of the judiciary in the country. It's not of the future, it is very much of the present. It is already happening, it is already transforming the legal sector. And for the first time, probably, it is giving an equal footing for everybody, and it is promoting access to justice. So, that's my view on it.
Jawad sir?
I think there's some background noise somewhere. Not just from the legal perspective, but overall, as a perspective of enhancement of the quality of life. That is where technology comes in and AI comes in, and if it can be used to enhance the quality of life and to ensure that there is an equitable distribution of the benefits to everybody, not just to a few. That is where technology and AI is going to be very helpful. But if we are talking about a future where technology and AI is going to replace human beings and create a useless class, now that is where I think we need to draw a line. Anything in excess, they say, is bad. Okay, that's what our elders have told us, and that's what our philosophies tell us. Anything in excess is bad. So we need to be able to draw that line as to what extent are we going to use technology to enhance the quality of our life, to give better access to justice, better access to the benefits that society can give to everybody. So there should be an equitable, distribution of all these benefits, and that is where I see technology and AI playing a very crucial role. So my only apprehension is, let's not think of a future where we'll be perpetuating or making the inequalities and the inequities worse than what they are today, because technology is monopolized by a select few and deprive the others of the benefits of it.
Right. Thank you, sir. Tanu ma'am?
So I will echo Namita. AI is already present. It's already aiding us. It is already creating new avenues for access to justice, and nothing better than this COVID to have brought that out to us, because AI was existing even earlier. The technology was existing earlier, but it is only due to COVID that we have started accessing that technology. And now it just needs to get better and better. So just now when Jawad said, for example, that, oh, there's some background noise, I was just thinking the next thing Microsoft should do is not only blur background, but blur background noise, and that's all that we do. We improve. The technology is already there. I see a question here which said, Jawad, it says it's already working on algorithm. Has it been designed in a manner which can outweigh the search? I'm saying it's already there. Now, step by step improvement. As we work on it, we improve on it. And that's the future. So welcome to the new future, and I think it's very, very exciting. It's good. Thank you.
Pallavi ma'am.
See, the blanket answer is yes, definitely, because we have enough proof, enough data, enough evidence to say that technology has been useful until now, right? My only, I think the only caveat there, or the only point there would be how inclusive our thought process is going to be from here onwards. If we are saying that, if we are saying the words accessibility, if we are saying the word affordability, who is it going to be accessible for? Who is it going to be affordable for? Who are we making these new technologies that we are talking about? Where are we getting the validations from? There's this, I don't know if there's a very common example that we give in our impact world, wherein there was a huge project that was taken up for the women of some village in Rajasthan to actually bring water to their village. And after doing that entire project, when they sat down, the women were actually not happy about it, because this was the only me time that they were getting away from the responsibilities of the family, when they used to walk together with their friends, and they used to actually get some time away from literally all the noise of everyone asking and screaming for their attention. And they actually hated the solution that was introduced to them. So I think somewhere when we are creating solution, then we are saying, because all of us agree to it, there's no debate around it, technology is useful, right? But what we are going to create out of it, who are we going to create the solution for, is something that we have to be very cognizant of. And that's a more important question whenever we look at these solutions. Instead of putting an umbrella answer to it, that it is going to be useful for everyone, maybe it will not be useful. There's a reason why telelaw as a scheme from Ministry of Justice has not really picked up the way that it was supposed to be picked up, because there's something definitely missing in that pipeline, right? So perhaps putting a dedicated, and personally, one of the fundamental principles that at least I follow is that put a micro lens to everything that we are saying. So I can't really put everyone into one single bucket and say all lawyers will benefit from it. Maybe all lawyers will not benefit from it. Not from the technology, but maybe a different deviation in the technology intervention will be required for them. So as long as we have a customized approach and don't take a generalized approach to building technology for the future, looking forward to it, excited for it. I'm part of it, so why not?
Well said, Pallavi.
Right, so I think we can now all safely say that the legal profession does not have AI in the biggest way possible, but I think we're getting there. Like Pallavi ma'am said, that we're getting there slowly, and we'll surely be there one day where things are much easier. And yeah, I would also like to say that the legal sector awaits this major technological overhaul to smoothen the system, and we are all eyeing for it, and we hope that it only becomes better and easier and more convenient for people from here on. So I think if now we'll end the panel discussion here, and it has been absolutely great to be connected with everyone on the panel, and we're so glad that you all have decided to be a part and came here, spent time with us, and talked to us. There are a lot of things that I have learned today that I had no idea about before this discussion. And I'm sure people who've attended have also learned a lot of new things. Yeah, I think we should keep doing stuff like this. I would love to keep doing stuff like this. We're very happy that you were here with us today. So now I'll just, Rachna will propose the vote of thanks, and we can then stop.
On behalf of the rest of the case team, I would like to thank all our panelists for taking out their time from their busy schedules to be here. It was an immensely insightful session and has given us a fresh perspective about the future of AI in law. I would like to thank Shreya Sharma, our founder and CEO, for moderating the discussion. A big thank you to all the dignitaries for gracing us with their presence in today's event and their never-ending support for all our endeavors. A special thank you to Nasir sir for guiding us, supporting us, and helping us right from conceptualizing the event to executing it. Thank you to our lovely audience. This event would not have been the same without you all. We would love for you to have a look at our website.
I think you're muted.
Shweta, you're on mute. Shweta, you're on mute. Shweta, you need to unmute yourself.
Shreya?
Thank you.
That is the peril of technology.
Shreya, whatever Shreya said in the last 30 seconds or so was entirely on mute.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. So I just,
Sorry,
I
unless
just
it was
said that on
intentional.
behalf of our team, I would like to thank all the panelists for taking out their time from their busy schedules to be here. It was an immensely insightful session and has given us a fresh perspective about the future of AI in law. I would like to thank Shreya, our founder and CEO, for moderating the discussion. A big thank you to our dignitaries for gracing us with their presence in today's event and their never-ending support with all our endeavors. A special thank you to Nasir sir for guiding us, supporting us, and helping us right from conceptualizing to executing this event. And thank you to our lovely audience. This event would not have been the same without you. We have added the link to our website in the comment section, so we would love for you to have a look at it. We hope that you will be a part of any future events that As the Case has in future. Please, all of you, be safe and healthy and have a great day ahead. I'm sorry for the confusion.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you.
Thanks everybody. So have a safe and good time out there.
Thank you. It was wonderful meeting you,
It was
Ashok. Pallavi.
Yeah.
Thank
So
you.
we'll be in touch.
Thank you, Shreya. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Take care, everyone. Stay safe, stay inclusive, think inclusive. Bye.
Bye.